Episode number 2. Here we go. Welcome to Podnutz Pro, episode number 2. Podnutz Pro is a show for people who may be interested in getting into small business or enterprise networking and work in that field. I'll introduce our co-host and let him tell you about what the show is all about. Let me just introduce him right now. His name is Matt Rainey from ah-computers.com. How's it going, Matt?
Good, Steve.
So why don't you tell everybody in your words, because you're the expert, what this show is about? What do you want it to be about? What are we gearing it towards?
Well, let's see. I think it's geared toward the tech who wants to get into supporting small businesses. Um, Making the transition to being more comfortable with servers, business networks, trying to move away from the home user mentality.
And the benefit of that is why would somebody
Hopefully
want
more
to
money for the tech. Businesses pay more.
Right, right.
Better hours too. Businesses typically 8 to 5, Monday through Friday.
And people want to get the hell out of there when they're done.
And they do. And businesses are much easier to support
They are.
than home users for sure. You don't have to worry about you know things that aren't business related. You know, home users. I want to make this movie. I want to, you know, typical home user things that you don't deal with in business. In business, my application is not working. My business app is not working, or I can't do this. I can't print. It's basic things. It's not. I want to. I don't even know what home users do because I don't support them that much. It's hard to,
Well, what do you
I'm
do
trying
at
to think of
home? What do you
the
do
home
at
users
home?
that we do support, but
No, you
it's,
got to look at what do you do at home? That's what home users do.
it might be different. I'll let my wife and kids do much. So,
Well, that's basically what the show is about. So we already did one episode. You guys enjoyed that. Hopefully, it was all about routers. So what are we going to talk about today, Matt?
it's about some server hardware.
Okay.
That's the first part is actually getting the hardware for the server. But first, and this may be a weekly thing, I don't know.
Okay.
I want to have a clarification from last show.
Sure.
And I said, I think I just didn't get my whole thought across. Once I said, if you're not using Exchange or just to block port 25 out, and if you're not using Exchange server, to block port 25 out completely. Now, of course, that means only if you're using Exchange server or web-based email. If I was using just a regular POP account, you can't block port 25 because no one would be able to send mail.
Right.
So
right.
just to clear that up. And if they are using pop mail, of course, you want to move them away from that. So,
Okay.
and one selling point is I can't block the traffic. You're gonna get on a blacklist. You can't send mail. Back to that. So that's just a quick clarification from last show.
Okay.
Uh,
Good.
Don't block it if you're actually using it.
Thank you for doing that.
And that may be a weekly thing, so we'll see.
All right. We'll see how much feedback we get. All right. Cool.
Okay, so this week, just server hardware. Servers are not complicated, or they don't need to be complicated. Sometimes they are made complicated by someone who's trying to build one who's, again, got the home user mentality.
Okay.
We have some pictures that we'll put up, but this is going to be a typical server that we just got together this week. We brought it out to a client's office to start a migration. That's another story, but the hardware is what we're going to talk about today.
All brand new parts?
And the first, the server itself, there's only a few, just like any computer, there's only a few basic parts. You got CPU, RAM, hard drive. Now you're going to have most likely, or at least we do, tape drive in most places. The thing I think that trips up most people is the hard drives in a server.
Okay.
And that's because typically the servers are going to use RAID. And so if you're not used to dealing with RAID and know what it is and where you could have problems with it, that's a lot of times why people stay away from the servers.
Okay.
So basically, Steve, let's put up I don't know. Let's start with the picture that just says front.
Okay. All right, we do have pictures here. Sorry for you guys on audio. We're going to explain what we're looking at here, but for those of you watching on video, these are the perks of watching on video. So let me just change the application to.
And while you're doing that, this is just a front shot. It's an HP ProLiant, and I forget, it might be a G5 server. It's got, just a standard DVD drive on top. At the bottom, it's got a bay that we put the hard drives in. So the hard drives are accessible from the front of the case without having to open up the side panel.
Which is awesome. I bought one of those. You could buy them like for $20 at like just a computer store. I bought one of those for one of my towers, and it's just awesome to have those hot swap bays like that.
Right. And so with this, what you have is you have the drives, and if you notice, these drives, first off, they're 2.5-inch drives.
Oh, they are.
And these are what's called SAS drives.
Okay.
SAS is what is typically used in servers now, and it stands for Serial Attached SCSI drives. So SAS.
Okay.
Most people when they think servers, they think SCSI. Well, that's a little old school. The newer ones are going to use SAS, and because of the connector that's used to connect them, the connector is much smaller, so a lot of times they come in the 2.5-inch size.
I see. Yes.
Now these drives that we have, we put in a typical server. We're going to put in, if we get our way, at least 6 drives. And on this drive, on this configuration, we have 3 RAID 1 arrays.
Okay.
So we can cover a little bit real quick what RAID is. And the kind of RAID that you're going to see is going to be RAID 1 or RAID 5, basically. There's a RAID 0, which, of course, is not real RAID. Of course, RAID stands for Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks. Well, RAID 0 is just striping, meaning if you've got let's just use 1 gig drives, then it's a 2 gig array. It spans both drives. So if one drive goes out, you lose everything. That's not redundant.
Right.
But it's still called RAID 0.
Right.
RAID 1 is a mirrored set. So whatever's on one is mirrored to the other.
Okay.
RAID 5, you're going to need 3 disk minimum. And the total size of the array is, let's say you have 3 500 gig drives. It's n-1. So if you have 3 disks, it's 3 minus 1 is the size of the array. So 3 500 gig drives, 2 of them are usable space, so you'll get 1 terabyte.
Okay.
The drive is used for parity, meaning if one drive goes out, it knows what's on the drive because of the parity bit. We don't use RAID 5 much.
What do you use? 1?
RAID 1.
Okay.
And the reason is RAID 5 has some overhead. It's got to write all that parity to the drive. So you have an overhead, it slows it down. A lot of software vendors tell us, don't put our software on a RAID 5 array. And we've had that a lot.
Really?
But that's what is very common out there, is to put it on a RAID 5. Because that's what, it's more disk, it must be better. The advantage is you can have larger arrays because a RAID 1 is just a mirror.
Right.
So your array set's going to be as big as one of the drives. That's
Right.
it. A RAID 5, you're going to have your bigger array, and if you add more drives, you get more array space.
Right.
But you have overhead to write all that parity information.
I see.
With a RAID 1, you have the write time is about the same, but the read time is a little bit faster on a RAID 1. So RAID 1's a little bit better performance.
But it's more expensive because you have to go 1 for 1 for every drive, right?
Right. It's just, and you can read from either drive because they're in sync.
Okay.
So better read times, same write times. RAID 5, you get overhead on the write, because it's got to write more information. Sometimes if you're writing 1 bit, you might have as many as 4 writes to write everything.
Okay.
So, We don't use it, and I say we don't. In rare cases, we do. Some TV stations, radio stations, we have to have RAID 5 because we have to have larger arrays. And in some cases, we actually do use span volumes, RAID 0, to have even larger arrays.
Huh.
But that's not for data that's persistent,
Right.
it may be just editing and then they save it somewhere else.
Okay.
So on these, these SAS drives, they're 2.5-inch drives. I think they're like 15,000 RPM. They're much more like, okay, so they're more like SCSI drives than SATA drives. It's serial attached SCSI, and some people confuse SAS for SATA drives.
Right.
They look similar, but they're not. So just know that SAS is different than SATA. When you're going to be building a server, you're going to see out there SAS drives.
So it looks like in this server there's SAS along the bottom, but you have 3.5s up top.
The ones at the bottom with the red handles,
yeah,
and that's all SAS drives.
What about the ones up in the top?
Up at the top.
Oh, are there no drives in those bays?
There's no drives in those bays.
Gotcha.
That's expansion bays. You could put a tape drive in there. You could put, and actually we'll have another picture where in that open space where normally you'd put more CD-ROM drive or a tape drive, you can actually add a second bay in there to expand the number of hard drives the server can hold.
I see. So in this server, you have 6 drives in there.
I have 6 drives in this one. So what we do, and we have the system drive is RAID 1. We have another array that's going to be for data, and another array that's going to be for exchange.
Cool.
We have 2 open slots. This particular bay can hold 8 drives. We have 2 blanks. It's easy to expand storage on these, which is why, people might ask about NAS drives. I know that's common, but that's, in my experience, more of a home user thing.
Okay.
Because these servers, I can put as many as, let me see how many the server can hold.
And the price of these SAS drives is reasonable?
Yeah, they're reasonable.
Okay.
It's, there are enterprise level drives. I guess one more quick thing. When people are building RAID arrays, sometimes they might use just a regular old SATA drive.
Okay.
Because a lot of even basic servers or desktop computers, you can just put some SATA drives in there and make a RAID with those. Some SATA drives are not designed for RAID. So if you get just certain drives and you wonder why your RAID array keeps going offline, they're not designed for RAID.
Okay.
Most manufacturers have a line that's specific if you're going to be putting it in a RAID array.
Okay.
So this particular server can hold 16 drives.
Wow.
So there's no real reason for me to have a NAS,
Right.
network attached storage, when I can just put the drives in the server.
Right.
So, let's see.
I like that you gave us pictures. This is really giving me mass on everything.
And it helps to see it. I mean, a lot of people get nervous when they look at the when they see server.
Right. Right.
But it's nothing to be confused about. Let me look at my notes here.
You just tell me what picture you want me to fire up when you're ready.
Okay. Okay. The RAID 1. Another advantage of RAID 1. My advice is always do a RAID 1 on the system drive. Always. Sometimes if you order a system pre-built from anybody, it's going to have a RAID 5. I don't know why. A RAID 1, the advantage is you can pull a drive out, and I'm going to give you a perfect example because we had this happen to us last week. A client called, they got hit by lightning. The lightning hit their security fence. It went through the fence to the control system for the security gate. That security gate had a cable going through the serial port connecting to the server so they could program the codes that are used to open the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Took out the motherboard.
Wow.
Okay. So I take the server back to my shop. Doesn't do anything. No power, nothing. we have some old servers laying around. We have a RAID 1 in that system. I was able, because it's a RAID 1, take one drive out, put it into another server, and boot up to it. Now, of course, it found new hardware in the motherboard, but it was able to boot with the generic driver for the RAID, and it booted. If you have a RAID 5 on that server as a system drive, you can't easily take that whole RAID 5 and move it over.
I see.
So what we did is we turned off RAID on the server we were moving the drive to, just told it to boot to a single disk, and in these RAID configurations wizards, it's just called JBOD, to just a bunch of disk, meaning there's no RAID 1, no RAID 0, it's just a single disk.
Right.
Which is funny that a single disk is called JBOD for just a bunch of disks. But we just told it turn off RAID, just configure it as a JBOD, and it booted. So once that booted, I was able to add the second drive, which was the original mirror for that drive, and say now turn on RAID, make this a RAID 1, mirror this drive to that drive, and then rebuilt my RAID 1 from the one that just booted. Now I'm booting up on a different server with a RAID 1.
In a short amount of time.
Right. Short amount of time. This didn't take very long. And then I was able to move over. They had two RAID 1s, smaller company. So we took the other RAID 1, took one of those disks from the data array, did the same thing, moved it over, told it just a single disk. It read it. Then we added the second one, told it now add RAID 1 and mirror it.
So they were up and running pretty damn fast.
The same day. Their server died. It's an old server. We have been telling them to replace it. And it doesn't matter. A new server would have been taken out too. It's just luckily they didn't get the new server yet. So
yeah.
They took out their old server.
They're probably happy they didn't listen to you.
Yeah, well, probably so. Because we don't warranty against lightning strikes. They can take that up with
higher powers.
We don't warranty lightning strikes. And this came in through the alarm system. It didn't come in. We have a battery backup. All that's protected, but it came in through the alarm because our gate was fried, and everything, all the gate systems were fried, and that was attached to the server.
Wow.
So it's pretty obvious it came from there. So we were able to get them back up with a RAID 1. RAID 5, you're not going to be able to move those over because I wouldn't be able to tell the other server to just boot as a plain disk because you need the whole set.
Right.
So I like RAID 1. I don't mind it if it was a RAID 5 on the data array, it wouldn't have been a problem because I think I'd have been able to move over data system, but the boot to it, the RAID 1 really helped out. So we do RAID 1. You don't need RAID 5. With the overhead and the recovery, RAID 5 is not good for system drives.
That's good to know.
So let's look at the one that says
we have a nice selection of pictures here for you guys.
How about just one that says inside?
Okay. We are looking at it now.
So this is just the side panel removed. And what we're looking at is, you can see in the bottom right of this server is the inside where the drive cage is. And all it is, it's a drive cage. The drives connect to a backplane, which is a circuit board on the back of this cage. They don't connect directly to the motherboard. So while we have 6 drives in there, they just plug in. Plug in, plug out. They're hot swappable.
Nice.
So the only thing that connects from this back of this drive cage is power, which we'll show later on. And we've got 2 connectors that plug to the motherboard. That's it. So even though we have 6 drives, if you had 6 drives on your desktop computer, you would think you would have 6 SATA cables, 6 power cables. You'd have cables all over the place inside of the server.
Now, this is nice
and that's how cheaper servers are. If you don't have a backplane with removable drives, these things usually do have to connect to the motherboard directly or to an add-in card.
Look how nice and clean that is.
Right. There's nothing, this particular server came to us with one processor, one uh, 6 gigs of RAM, which we'll show that later. We stuck the drives in, and I created the arrays and loaded Windows. I mean,
Nice.
very, very quick. Um, I think I might have one called Inside 2, which just shows a little close up of the back plane. And so it shows the circuit board with the power connector, and then it shows the two connectors on the motherboard, which are those little silver tabs on the left, just above the red cable. And that's it. That's all that connects to this thing.
I see.
Now, if you were to add a second, in the other diagram, it showed that you could add a second drive cage to this server. And the way that works is that drive cage just has a cable that connects to the first one.
I see.
And that's clean too. That's one cable.
Very cool.
So as you can see, a good server like this is actually much easier to work inside of than your average desktop computer.
Definitely. I mean, that's one of the things I hated about building systems is cabling all the wires together, making sure they're out of the way. This is super, super airy.
That's right. That's right. It is. We can look at one picture that's called how about backplane? There's one called backplane. And this shows just a real close-up connector picture of the backplane. It's just two internal SAS connectors, which, if you plugged in a SATA drive, you know what the connector looks like. It's similar to a SATA connector. This is the internal SAS connector. It's a little different. So you see two of those, and in the front of that is the power connector.
Okay.
And that comes out of the box all connected. So you don't mess with any of that stuff. You just slide the drives in.
Nice. Super easy.
Very easy. So the advantage of one of these things, if you have a backplane like this, is let's say your server starts beeping. You get a call from the client, server's beeping. You log in, there's a web interface that you log in, and it says drive 3 has failed. Well, the advantage of a backplane is I can tell from the diagram easily which one drive 3 is. I yank it out, I put a new one in, it rebuilds, I'm done. If you had one that wasn't hot swappable, you'd have to shut the computer down. You'd have to, hopefully, when you put 6 drives in, hopefully you would have connected drive some kind of logical order, meaning left to right, drive 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully drive 0 would connect to SATA port 0, and so on. Drive 1 connects to SATA port 1. Because if they say port 3 goes out and you don't have a backplane, you've got to make sure you know which one drive 3 is. And it means drive 3, like SATA port 3 is what it might mean.
All right.
But if you have a cable going from SATA port 3 and you just connected it to the last one on the row, you've got to know that. And if it's not hot swappable, you got to shut it down, pull the drive, make sure you pulled the right one, boot it back up. Once you have the replacement, you got to shut it back down again, put the drive in, turn it back on, let it rebuild. Hot swappable, it's a little more expensive up front, but it's very easy to manage.
Right.
Just slide it in, slide it out. And there's a little clip. These things have this little red clip. You push the red clip, handle pops out, you just pull it out. And that's all there is to it. I have a picture here. Let's look at the onboard SATA ports.
Sure.
This particular server has 6 SATA ports. We are using one to go to the DVD drive. We will not be using the rest. There's no need. There's no need for it.
Really?
Perhaps if you've got a tape drive that had a SATA connection, maybe, but I wouldn't get one of those. Look at the one that says how about the one that says
Slots?
Yeah, let's look at slots.
Okay. There's slots.
If I was going to use an internal tape drive, this server motherboard has two connectors. I don't know if you can see them that well in this picture, but there's two connectors where you can plug in another SAS device. Um, it's got on this this it's to the left, bottom and left of the red and white capacitor. Looks like a little on this picture, you can see the silver casing around it to the left of the battery.
I see it.
So this, I would use that, I think, over the SATA drive connections. Now, for tape drives, well, let me go back to this. Let's go to RAM config.
Sure. RAM config.
These new servers have ways that you have to put the RAM in, and it might be confusing, but a lot of these servers are easily diagrammed. This is a sticker, or on most of these servers, you're gonna have a sticker on the side panel. Take the side panel off, you got a sticker, and it's a huge. It usually covers a whole side panel, and this is the shot of the RAM configuration. On this server, we've got dual Xeons, as labeled with the diagram P1 and P2 for processor 1 and processor 2. Above processor 1 is a bank of RAM slots. That's the RAM that's associated with processor 1. And it's easily laid out on the left. We've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So it says on the little diagram, and it's easy to look at. Even if you've never used a server, you should be able to read, I need to put my memory in slot A first, then B, then C. I don't know if you can get a close-up on that or not, but that's the RAM that if you have a processor 1, you need to have a slot, you just follow it in order, A, B, C. And most servers have documentation like this to where they make it very clear about what you're supposed to do, where you're supposed to put the RAM, where you're supposed to put a slot, or if you're adding in a card in the slot. In our case, we added a second processor. So we put a processor in processor 2, and then we had to order RAM to go with it. So again, this has A, B, C. And basically, channel 1 has a slot for A, D, and G. Channel 2 has a slot for B, E, H. Channel 3 has a slot for CFI. So we put in A, B, C in those slots.
I see.
If we were going to add more, we'd go to D, E, F.
I see.
And it just put them in order. The servers make it very clear, and that's the difference again between a entry-level server and a better server is one thing that's better is the documentation, how clear it is. Let's see, we have a picture. Let's look at the picture called hot swap power supply.
Okay.
Most of these servers are going to have a place where you can have multiple power supplies. Because everybody knows you're dealing with desktop computers. A lot of times, power supply is the problem. It's not pushing enough power. It goes out. You got to shut the computer down, change the power supply, and boot it back up. With servers, you don't want to do that. You want to shut it down as little as possible. So most servers are going to have where you can put in, and these again, entry-level servers are not going to have these features. As you get up, they're going to add these features. It's got a place where you can put in multiple power supplies.
Nice.
Now, in this particular server, when I took the picture, there's only one. So what it is usually, in this case, it's a red tab. Usually it's some kind of tab that's sticking out. You pull that down or left or up or however you do it, and the whole power supply just slides out.
It looks small. Is it thin? Is it thin?
It is thin. It's a thin, long one.
Okay.
Because what's happening, we have a picture for this later, and we can show you. This just connects to a slot. It's almost like a backplane for the drives, but it plugs into the power connector on the motherboard.
Okay.
And on this particular server, above the power supply that's in there, there's a blank with the two holes in it.
Right.
That's a little blank, and it's labeled PS2. PS1 is labeled, PS2 is labeled, clearly labeled. And that's because if you get an alert on the server, it might tell you PS1 not functioning or PS2 not functioning.
I see.
And that's there so you know which one is PS1 and which one is PS2. So that blank just pulls out. You just push another one in. Now you've got dual power supplies.
It's pretty cool.
And that's all there is to it. Everything's in these servers are hot swappable. You don't have to turn it off to swap these out. And if you look in, let's see, there's one power supply connectors, I think.
Okay. There we go. There it is.
Okay, so this is the 1 and 2. So you got, in this picture, we're looking at 2 power connectors, which look like, if you're connecting your power supply to your desktop board, how the 12-pin or 16-pin connector plugs into the motherboard.
Right.
This is plugged into the motherboard. And what's behind, what you can't see, is that there is a connector that slides into this. So that's already connected to the motherboard.
So the
and when
power
you
supply
slide
just
that power
slides.
supply in, it just connects to a connector inside there.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
So there's no cables to mess with inside to change this power supply, and everything is just easy to remove, easy to put in.
Damn, I like servers already.
Yep. Now, some of the older servers, of course, you're not going to have the SAS drives. Older servers, you may still working with SCSI.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, except the drives are bigger. A lot of them are still going to be hot swappable. They're still going to be in drive cages. They're just going to be bigger. When you're dealing with these, you want to make sure your clients know that when this server is beeping really loud, they need to tell you. Because a lot of times they'll just ignore it. And I can't tell you how many times, and some of these servers will have notification. So if it does go offline, it will send us an email. But some of them don't have that. So you have to let them know if this thing is beeping, and I tell them if we have notification or not. If you hear any beeping from here, you need to call us right away. I've had clients where I've gone to check for something, and I hear beeping, and I go see what it is, and the server's got drives that are offline. And I say, "How long has this been beeping?" And they say, "Oh, a few months at least." And I say, "Well, don't you think that's important?" And they say, "Well, we thought about calling, but we got used to it."
That's so awesome, man.
Okay. Yeah. And one thing you learn when supporting businesses is they forget everything you tell them. Everything. You can write it down. You can send it an email. You can put notes on the server. They're gonna forget it.
Right. That's great.
And they love to think that you didn't tell them. So I love to have notes. Hear beeping, call, and I have our phone number.
Okay.
But they'll forget. So, I say, well, you have 2 drives out. Luckily, it's in different arrays, but we need to replace both of these things. So let your clients know if they hear beeping. If you have notifications, set that up so you can know preemptively, look, it's down. I'm going to get a new one for you.
Right.
Now, what RAID is not? RAID is not a backup. I see a lot of people don't have a backup solution. If I go into a new business, they don't have any backup solution at all.
Why isn't it? Because it's making a backup?
Well, it's redundant. It's not a backup. So if the motherboard goes out, or if your server is stolen or catches fire,
right,
there's nothing off site.
Right, I got you.
So it shouldn't be thought of as a backup.
Okay.
It's redundant, meaning if one goes down, you're not down. But redundant is different than backup. And I've seen quite a few places, I say quite a few, I've seen this enough to mention it, where there was a RAID 1 on the system drive and a RAID 1 on the data drive set up. That's nice. I went to a client, I said, "Okay, you're good. You got a RAID 1 on the system. You got a RAID 1 on the data. But why are these drives popped out?" So they had 4 drives. 2 were popped out, and they were running on 1. And the girl said, "Well, that's how we back up." And I said, "What do you mean that's how you back up?" She goes, "Once we got pushed these drives in, and then a few days later I pull them out. So their backup strategy was to let the RAID 1 rebuild and then pop it out, and then when she thinks about it next week, pop it back in.
You know, that couldn't have been her idea.
No, it wasn't her idea. This was the IT guy before us. That was
Right.
his idea
Right.
because he and I called him. He said, "Oh, he can still talk to you if you have questions." So I called him and I asked him why he was doing that to see what he said. And he said, "Well, that's their backup in case something happens." And so I had to explain to him that's not a backup. And he said, I forgot what he said,
Who
but
cares? Don't even explain it to him. He's just out of
yeah.
there.
Well, and then I find out that he's just a high school kid trying to take care of this business.
I
So
see.
when I called him at 2 o'clock, I guess it was his home number, and his mother answered, and he said he'd be home from school at 3:30. I said, really? So I I called from the client's office. I said, "Do you know that he's in school right now?"
He's at
And
recess right now.
yeah, and she says, "Oh yeah, we know. We can't call him till after 3:30."
That's awesome.
Lovely, lovely.
That's great.
So they went, you know, obviously, and I can't blame him. It's when you first he might obviously didn't know what he was doing, but he had nobody to show him how to
Right.
do it correctly. Single guy operation, young guy trying to take care of a business. I don't know how he got that job, but you know, if you don't know, if no one's told you, how do you know? So I can't fault him too much. It goes up to experience. Funny story, but I had to explain to the client why they now needed to get a backup solution when they've been running fine for years.
Right.
So, you know, I had to explain to them redundant versus backup, and they went with it. They liked it, and I thought it was funny because when they first implemented their backup system, they didn't like the beeping, so he of course disabled the alarm so there wouldn't be beeping in the
That's
during the backup
so
solution.
great. They didn't like the beeping.
Right.
I love it. That's good stuff.
Yeah, and the thing you see a lot of times with these servers, in a desktop board, we go to some places where they're running just a desktop computer and the guy loaded server OS for them. That's not a good idea either.
Well, now after
Um,
seeing this, I get what you're talking about. I mean, it's one thing to say you need a server, not just a regular desktop, and then people are saying, "Well, what's the difference?" And this is great stuff.
Well, and another difference is these servers, the I/O, the input output that these servers are capable of, are much much faster than a desktop. These servers are designed for input output of many users, not just one user surfing the web or
Right.
running, word processing.
Gotcha.
So these circuits aren't designed for the load that's put on the server.
I see.
That's one reason. Same thing with the routers. These servers like that, they get overwhelmed, they lock up, they just aren't going to perform well at all. Um, Another thing with the server hardware is tape drives. We still use tape drives. There's different kinds. There's the actual tapes, or there's the new ones, which are little SATA hard drives, RDX controllers. We're still playing with the RDXs. They're cheaper upfront cost overall. They're not as fast. So it all depends on the client's budget and how much they have to back up and what their backup window is. So, if they've got a lot to back up and they start to back up at 9 o'clock at night and it's not finishing until 10 in the morning, that tape drive is not good enough. You got to get something faster.
Gotcha.
Because they're going to have open files when they come in. The backup's going to be failing on the verify. They're going to want to know why the backup says failed, even though you tell them it's because you had files open. It looks bad on you. Again, we have one person assigned to change tapes, and it's usually going to be the person who's there every day. It could even be a secretary,
Right.
but you assign that job to change tapes to one person. That's their job. So notifications are going to go to that person, maybe somebody else too, a supervisor or an owner in a small business, just so they can monitor the backups passing. But the notifications go to that person. They know when it passes. They know when it fails. Have them change it every day. If it's not passing, a backup should run in a few hours, I think, 3 or 4 hours. So if you need to have an Ultrium, let's say an Ultrium 2, they're very, very fast. I have some, they can back up like 1,200 megabytes a minute, so a full backup can be done in a couple of
Hmm.
hours. You know, it, it's what they need. It
Right.
may not be what they want,
Right.
but it's what they need.
So that's
Um,
all on-site backup. Is that
on site, and then we tell them take it with you. You know, drop it in your purse, or take it with you off site. The next day you bring it back, you swap the tape, put this in your purse. You should always have one off site. If you want 2 sets, you can keep 1 set off site. Normally they just get 5 tapes, is what they choose to do. Monday through Friday, they take one off site every day. And that's for the worst case scenario, because there's also things that we'll talk about later on, like shadow copies, where they can restore files
right?
right from the server without using the tape.
Hmm.
Um, I rarely restore stuff from tape. That's for something catastrophic.
Right.
Um, or if they don't have enough hard drive space for shadow copies. Um, but that's another topic completely.
Okay.
Let's see.
More pictures.
Not sure if we need any more pictures.
All
Let's
right.
see. I think we covered everything that we had pictures for.
Okay.
This server is the one called, if you want to look at it, slots. I mean, these servers a lot of times, this has got a lot of slots in it. Um, there's not really much you need to put in these slots unless you have some kind of proprietary s- system that needs a card inserted.
They're just
You know,
PCIs, right? And one's a PCI Express.
well, they're different slots. They're like they're high speed PCI.
Okay.
Some of them are you can put another RAID controller in it if you wanted to. So there's specific slots for that. You can't just stick it in any drive.
Mm-hmm.
But we rarely use these slots. I mean, maybe if you wanted to add a SCSI card and you have an external tape drive that's a SCSI connector, you might put a controller in there.
Okay.
Um, you know, the Ultrium tape drives that we use usually we use external drives because we put them on top of the server or on the table, so they're not going in and out of opening the door to the server.
Okay.
Um, so normally we have external drives. So normally we'll have a card. We may have one card in there for an external SAS connector or an external SCSI connector, and that'll be it.
Okay.
There's not too much usually you need to pile in these things. Sometimes servers you may need. We have some servers that have a lot of faxing that they do through the small business server. So they'll have a fax card with like 8 ports in it for faxing. You know, that's rare. That's their specific need,
Right.
but we don't have a lot of that. For the most part, you see the server as it is. Just that's it. Um, what you see from that side view, that's it. We don't put anything else in it. We don't need to. It keeps it clean. The airflow keeps it cool
Less
without
is
stuff in
more.
the way.
Less is more.
You know, less is more. You don't need that stuff. Um, the desktop boards, like I said, they get overcrowded. It's a small case usually, lots of cables in there. It's not built for the input output, and
Yeah.
it's not a good thing. Um, we had one server, and this is a good example. They called us because they kept going down every day, um, and they had a desktop board for their server, and they had 25 users. Of course, the Windows was pirated. Um, desktop board for the server, and they had a cheap Linksys. They had everything wrong over there.
Really?
So when we gave them a quote for a server, of course, their initial reaction was shock. This is a $10,000 server. We paid $600 for this one. And, of course, you have to I understand this is more. You can't get a server for $600. If you do, you have what you're experiencing right now, which is lockups constantly. They had no backup. They had data loss constantly. This is what you get for $600. Pirated software and a cheap desktop computer. And that company now has grown significantly. They have, I think, 3 servers. They have a nice watch guard. Their company has grown probably quadrupled since we started doing work for them.
Wow.
There is no way they would have been able to grow like that if they would have continued with their other IT person.
Right. No, that's great.
So by giving them what they need or what would work, they're able to grow. So they would have been stuck. Who knows what would have happened?
Right.
It of course makes a difference if you're capable of running more things that you need to run for your business.
Right.
So now this server is for people who didn't see pictures, it's just a big tower computer. Um, you know, there are other servers, people have heard of blade servers, or they're thin, and they're meant to be mounted in a rack. A lot of our clients, while I like racks, a lot of these clients just don't have room for a rack unless they have a new construction where they're going to build a server room and we can put a rack in it. A lot of them don't have it.
So you would, if they had room, you would choose a rack instead of the server we just looked at?
This can be rack mounted. There are rails to where you can put it in a rack mount kit. But if they have room, if we're doing a new install and they have room for it and it's in the budget and they have a nice room for it, we'll put it on a rack. We'll get rack mount UPSs, rack mount the switches, rack mount the server. But the rack mount servers can be limited to how much you can put in them.
I see.
So the rack mounts tend to be more expensive. You hear about 1U, 2U, 3U servers. That's how much space it takes up in the rack. Each unit being a 1U. So you might have a rack that's 35U, well, you've got 35 units. So if your battery backup is going to take 6, you put that at the bottom. You put your heavy things at the bottom, put your, and then go switches at the top, usually with the patch panel. But they're more expensive, of course. They're smaller, they're more compact, they're more expensive.
Right.
This kind of thing, if they had a rack, we could still rack mount it. But
right, still going to be pretty big though.
It'll still be big. It's a big boy. But even still, it's not. You can see there's not much in it. It's a lot of air, so it's not as heavy as the old servers that people usually think about when they hear server. Those old servers can be hundreds of pounds with those. I mean, they're just like, I don't know, made of lead or iron or something. But they're not like that. This thing was only like 35 pounds. Not that heavy.
Right.
And in most small businesses, they're going to put this server wherever they have room, which might be in the same office as an office manager, or they might have an empty office. They can just stick it in. They're not concerned with the rack. So
gotcha.
Don't be too caught up when you're doing these servers that I have to get a rack. It's extra cost for them. I'd rather put the cost into a better router, better switches, better server than having them buy a rack that looks nice.
Definitely. You're going for use here. Whatever's going to be best for the company in their budget. And if this is especially if this is their first server, well, you don't need a rack, do you?
No, you don't need one. I mean, it's nice to have
for expansion.
Well, just to keep things neat.
Okay.
Somebody, you might have a specific room with a big rack. You might have one rack that's, 20 or 30 or 20 even smaller, just that meant for patch panels and switches. And you might have your normal rack, which is, 40 or taller for everything else. But when you get rack mount stuff, everything's more expensive. The battery backup for rack mount's more expensive, as opposed to like we usually put in a smart UPS 1500 for a server. The rack mount power battery backup is more expensive, so you're paying more there. Rack mount servers are more expensive. Switches are the same. You can mount those, but when you go rack mount, they have to have a budget for that. If they're tight on budget, skip the rack.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
And I think that's it for the server hardware. So I said, server hardware is easy. It's the software and configuration that gets kind of hairy.
I like that server hardware. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's not confusing. I mean, you might get to an older server that is confusing, but just remember, most of them are just going to have the basic things. And the hard drives, where most people get tripped up, the hard drive is either connect to a backplane, or it's going to connect to a controller, or the controller may be on board. So it may go right to the motherboard, or it may be connected to an add-in card. So hard drives are going to connect somewhere. Whatever it's connected to has some kind of management interface that you can go see how they're configured. Once you understand that, it's not that hard.
Hmm.
And some of the ones that might be a few years old, it can be confusing. The hard drives are plugged into the motherboard, but you can add in a card that takes over the RAID functions of the motherboard. So the RAID card is just a card sitting on the computer with nothing attached to it, but that is your RAID controller.
I
It just
see.
takes over the motherboard. So again, whatever software utility or when you're booting the server up, you're going to see press, whatever for RAID management configuration. Go in there, see what's doing the RAID. It'll tell you, this controller on board. You can kind of get some clues.
Right.
And if you open it up, you can kind of see what's going on. But just don't be confused by the RAID. Something's controlling it, either a backplane, onboard card, something. Just find out what it is and then find the management console for it, and you should be good.
Cool. All right, Matt, should I do some voicemails now?
Sure.
Okay, I had to pause the recording for a sec because I have to configure the voicemails.
All right. Will I hear this through Skype, or will I need to mute Skype and listen to it through the...
Let me see. Tell me if you could hear this.
It's real low.
Yeah, that's... Hang on, I gotta change something here. System preferences... Sound. iMic. All right, let's try this.
You in the forums, and call and leave a message for your first episode of Podnutz Pro.
Yeah, that's good.
I have a small business.
You can hear that?
Yep, that was good.
All right. So let me start the recording again, and we'll play that.
Okay.
Okay, and here is the first voicemail from Adam.
Hey, Steve, this is Adam with Tech Ed PC, also Primus462 in the forums, and call and leave a message for your first episode of Podnutz Pro. I have a small business that has a Windows 2000 server. It's running on a Dell PowerEdge T600, I believe. It's got two 60-gigabyte SCSI hard drives in it, and one of the first hard drive is partitioned into two 30-gigabit partitions, and then it has a second hard drive. And the C drive, which is part of the partition, is full, only has 60 megabytes left. So I'm needing to expand the partition. So I was wondering if you guys had a suggestion for the plan of attack for that. I don't have any experience with servers, but I assume it's just like a regular PC. My plan of attack was going to be to have an old version of Ghost to take and image the drive, and then use to have a backup, and then use partition magic on it to expand the partition C drive, and then basically figure that would solve my problem. So just wondering if on this first show, if you had any other suggestions or anything to be careful about, I guess. So thanks for the all the work you've done, and I'm looking forward to the new show. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.
What do you think, Matt?
I think we heard that last week. Or 2 weeks ago. But
Oops.
But yeah, I think what I
If you already
like
if you already answered it,
we
that's
answered
cool.
that last time.
All right. This is from. Thanks, Adam, for sending us the same exact voicemail. No, I'm just kidding. That was my fault. Dave says, "Hello, Steve and Matt. I have a question for Matt. I'm running an SBS 2000. I'm running SBS 2003 in my office. I use it for a file server only at the moment, but looking to use Exchange soon. What I wanted to ask is, would you upgrade to SBS 2008 or stick with SBS 2003? I don't know if it's worth spending the extra to upgrade. Is there a big difference? Thank you, Dave." And he's from Hosting Click.
I wouldn't upgrade unless you need to upgrade. I mean, that's a cost that the client's going to have.
2003 is pretty solid.
I like 2003. I mean, unless you need to upgrade, and some of the things that you might need to upgrade for are the things that I like. I like Exchange 07 because I have some Mac computers and the Apple Mail can hook up with Exchange 07.
Okay.
But that's, not a very widespread need.
Right.
I like it. And I have clients that want to upgrade just for that reason. But I would I would not upgrade the existing hardware. Now, if he's talking about getting a new server, I would go with '08. But if the hardware is good, I would keep with '03.
Gotcha. All right, cool. And this is a voicemail. I swear we didn't hear this one yet. It's from Door to Door Geek, and here we go.
Hello, Steve, Door to Door Geek. This message is for Podnutz Pro. I gotta say, I'm liking this stuff. High level explanations of enterprise small business solutions. Resizing partitions, I can tell you on everything up to Windows 2008 servers, I use G-parted, freely downloadable, works great, never had an issue. Done it on at least 20 plus servers, because we had a nasty habit of making the C drive 20 gigs, and that was our, way we always did it here, even though me and a couple guys told not to. G-parted seemed to work flawless, never had an issue. Gotta love it. Free. All right, Steve. Keep up the good work. Bye.
I'm not doing the work, Door. It's Matt. No, thanks for the voicemail. What do you think, G-parted?
I've never used it. I've heard about it. A lot of times when we get, if a client buys a server from Dell or somebody else and they want us to come configure it, first thing I'll check is to make sure they didn't have that 20 gig partition. If they do, and it happens a lot, I tell them, okay, we're going to wipe this out, redo the arrays, and do it right. Our system drives, we have 2 arrays, like the one we showed a picture of. I believe that was 72 gig drives, which, is going to be good enough for the system drive. But there's no reason to partition the system drive. Just,
Yeah.
And if we see it before it's in service, we just fix it before we bring it back out. I've never used G-parted, so I can't say how it works. I have used the Cronus products to resize. It's not free, but that's what we've used.
Okay. Well, thanks for the voicemail, Door. We got another one from Door 2. And I love the way Google Voice Translate. It tries to transcribe these messages. I got to send these to you guys. It's hilarious. In this one, it calls Door to Door Geek Storm Door. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you have Google Voice and somebody send you a voicemail, Google tries to transcribe what they're saying, and it never comes out right. Anyway, here's his message.
Hello, Steve, Door to Door Geek. This message is for Podnutz Pro. This one is to throw out a real quick tip. To me, the simplest and most comprehensible way to figure out what is taking up space on any drive is SpaceMonger, and it's version 1.4. That gives you a very simple to easy to understand graphical display of folders and files. The bigger they are, the more space they take up. So it's pretty obvious most of the time how to find out what is eating up the drive. Because yes, I do agree absolutely with Matt. Your first solution should be find out what's taking up space, why is it taking up space, and find out if it can be moved. Okay, guys. Talk later. Bye.
Did you ever use SpaceMonger, Matt?
No, I've used something called Tree Size for that purpose. There's quite a few of them out there. Just the one that we found was Tree Size.
I love SpaceMonger. I mean, it's actually getting to be pretty ancient. It's version 1.4. It's the free version. I used to use that all the time, but it does crash every time you try to use it to delete something. But it gives you a nice graphical representation of what's on your drive. So I'm a SpaceMonger fan, but I never tried Tree Size. I gotta check it out.
Yeah, and that's what Tree Size does too. It'll just show you the file structure with what's in it, and we'll talk about it, and on the show. But God, Server 2008. One of the things that takes up space is that WSUS server. If you just install SBS 08 and don't pay attention to those settings, in a year you're going to have like 60 gigabytes taken up from it.
Really? What does it do?
It's pulling down all the updates by default, and it just saves them.
Updates. That's lame.
So I've gone into places where and it can be anything, but a lot of times it's log files, and with '08 server, it's that WSUS server if it's not set up right, or if it's not attended to.
Right.
Those things will eat up the drive within a year.
That's awesome. All right, good tip. All right, that's going to be it for today's show. We are out of emails, out of voicemails, and I'm happy that you guys could hear them. I'm really proud of that. All right, Matt. Anything you want to end off on for tonight's show? Any last comments?
No, that Twitter. I mentioned the Twitter account, Podnutz Pro. I forget about it because I've never used it before. But if you follow that, you might get a hint of what I'm doing during the day. It may not be useful tips for everybody, but if like the last one's about DHCP, having reservations.
I think it's good. I think it's good to have a little injection of your knowledge every day.
Yeah, and you can kind of see, because in that instance, what was happening was, some guy went into one of my clients' offices and he was trying to set up a printer, and he just picked an IP address and assigned it, and then it caused all kind of problems. Somebody else in the company called me saying they were getting errors with duplicate IPs, and I'm having to figure out what changed, and this guy came in and just grabbed an IP that was in the pool, and I'm having to track down MAC addresses to find out what changed. So, it was a little annoying for the customer, not for me because I just built them. But,
those are the kind of things people get on your Twitter feed.
Yeah, I was just at the time I was like, call us and we'll do a reservation. I mean, don't just pick an IP. That's ridiculous.
That's awesome.
And luckily it wasn't something that interfered with something important. It was just
right.
One of the workers, but it could have been worse.
Sure. If you want to follow Matt on Twitter, it's twitter.com/Podnutz Pro. Okay. Anything else, Matt?
Let's see. If I want to go over a programming note right now, we couldn't do last week. December has 5 Wednesdays. We're good for all the Wednesdays but December 1st. So we're good for the 8, 15, 22, 29.
So we're not having a show next week?
Not
okay.
As of right now, no.
That's fine.
I'm trying to, but if I'll get in touch with you and we'll Twitter that out if we can change that. But as of right now, just the last 4 Wednesdays, so not the first one.
Okay. So if you guys hear that, we're going to try to do like 3 Wednesdays a month, rough on average. And one of them we can't make. So that's going to be next week, and then we'll do 3 shows after that. So not on the same day. We'll do 3 shows every week after that.
Yep.
So just so you know, if you're looking for us next week and we're not there, that's why. But we will keep you posted. I mean, follow us on Twitter. That's where I like to make all my announcements as well. All right, that is going to be it for today's episode of Podnutz Pro. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you next time.